Hi folks, welcome back to the Folklore of Being. I hope you guys are well. Are you well? Good. I hope you've also got a nice hot beverage on the go, because we are going to sit down and we're going to get our teeth into some more goblins. And in this particular video, where I'm getting a bit silly, in this particular video we are looking at bogies. So if you're wondering at this point if bogies are related to bogeymen, yes they are, because bogies are the roots of the childhood threat of behave or the bogeyman will get you. They are the stories that were told to travellers who were foolish enough to want to travel at night time. They were the stories told by the fireside about all of the wild places that we should never go to, those hills that we shouldn't climb, the forests that we shouldn't wander into, the rivers that we shouldn't cross, and the times that we should be tucked up in bed. When you look at folklore historically rather than through its stories, you realise that there were a lot of everyday dangers to our ancestors that we don't even think about now, because modernity has removed those dangers that they face doing even the simplest of tasks. Say, like washing your clothes. We simply put them in the machine and then we go off and do other things and we don't think about it. But our past relatives, they had to carry their clothes to the nearest river or pond, and this simple task could actually be dangerous to do. To our modern minds, falling into a river or pond is really no big deal unless someone's around to witness it or put you on TikTok. Then it's humiliating and embarrassing. But our ancestors, you have to consider that their clothing was made of wool, which is a fabric which absorbs an incredible amount of water, meaning that once it was soaked, it was very easy for these people to become drowned, as their garments became like stone and actually dragged them beneath the surface of the water. So having some mystical creature squatting somewhere dangerous was a deterrent to people who might otherwise get themselves into trouble because they're not looking out for the dangers around them. This might make them more cautious. And one example of such a creature is Jenny Greenteeth. Jenny Greenteeth, she has long green fangs and claws. She haunts ponds and she pulls children under who get too close to the water. Now, if you want to survive an encounter with Jenny Greenteeth, you can actually tell that she's lurking beneath the surface of a pond if there's green scum on the surface. Now, you want to pay attention to this because her favourite snack, num 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 num, is your little piggies, your toes. So don't dip your feet into water if there's green scum on the top. Now, the silliness aside, without stories of bogies, water sprites and demons that came in many forms, the vulnerable in a town or village could get into danger. An elderly person or a young child who wanders too close to a stream or pond, for example, is in danger of falling in. The largest percentage of victims of bloody bogies is children, because stories of bogies of all kinds were used to traumatise children into submission. Some types of child terrorising bogies are the Scottish Bodach, who will come creeping down the chimney, or there's Jack up the orchard from Shropshire, who will gladly take an ill-behaved child from a tired parent. Now, a Hobyah is a particularly evil and dangerous Scottish bogie. What they do is they kidnap people, they take them to their cave lair, and you're made to mine fairy gold. And when the Hobyah's done with you, do you think they're going to let you go? No, 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 no. You, my friend, are going into the stock pot and you're going to get eaten, like Jenny Greenteeth and the toes. The Yorkshire Knocky Bow will tap on walls to scare children. And then there's the Devonshire's fantastically named, and I hope I pronounced this right, Tankera Bogus, who drags children away into a pit. Then there is Tom Dockin, who has iron teeth to devour children with. The Isle of Wight's Gooseberry Wife protects gooseberry bushes from the greedy hands of rambunctious children. Now these creatures, such as the Gooseberry Wife, are protection against children eating unripe or rotten food and getting sick. Each of these bogey creatures has a purpose of preventing precocious children from misbehaving or going places that they shouldn't, or just causing general mischief and trouble, like little goblins. This is where we move into the Bogeyman territory. Now, some of these are not English and my pronunciation is probably going to be terrible, so I'm going to ask for your forgiveness now, because I am probably going to butcher the pronunciations of these things. So I'm very sorry, but let's start with Germany. In Germany, the Bogeyman is known as the Schwarzermann, and he hides in dark places like under the bed or closets. In Italy, he's known as l'uomo nero, and he's the kind of apparition that's also known as a hat man. He wears long black cloaks and coats and wears a hat that hides his face. He is said to whisk away naughty children to a mysterious land. In Iran, he's known as l'Ulokokore, and he would eat children who didn't finish their dinners. In Sweden, it's known as Monster under Sängen, meaning monster under the bed. Now, of course, this unnamed monster under the bed's sole purpose is to reach out and grab you and pull you down into some unknown realm that you'll never be seen again from, for having the naughtiness to get out of bed at the wrong time of night. Now, kids, I know why they've told you this story, and I can tell you safely that you do not need to know what that thumping sound is, and you should just go right back to bed. We've just talked about how these bogies are terrifying apparitions that serve particular purposes, and like now I'm going to tell you about bogies that aren't just solitary terrors, but like an actual small army of trouble. I'm actually on the side of the bogies in this tale, and you will probably hear the sass gas coming out of my ears as we go further on in this story. So it's a folk tale known as the Golden Ball, and in this story, two sisters meet an ethereally handsome man who, dressed drippingly in gold, hands them each a golden ball. Now, these girls have clearly never read a folk story or a fable in their lives, because they would have known better, to be honest, but they accepted these gifts and the condition that went with it. Now, what is the condition, I hear you ask? Well, let me tell you. They have to keep the ball, but they mustn't lose it. And if they lose it, then they are to be hanged. The older sister looked after her golden ball and didn't treat it like a toy like the younger sister did. Now, the younger sister would throw it here and roll it there, and one day while she was throwing it here and rolling it there, it rolled away from her and into a house. This seems to be a girl that gives up easy, because she didn't even knock the door and ask for the golden ball or anything like that. She just went, oh well, guess that's me hanged, and made her way home. This is all sad and all, but of course, what's a fairy tale going to be without a suitor or a sweetheart to come and save the day? Luckily for the younger sister, she had a fella, and he vowed to retrieve the golden ball. He set off for the house. When he got there, he was clambering over the locked gates when the apparition of an old woman rose up and declared that in order to get the golden ball back, he must sleep 3 days in the house. The happy ending obviously is not going to come if the boyfriend doesn't agree, and so he enters the house. When night falls, his adventures begin as he hears bogles in the garden. Looking out the window, sure enough, there is a gaggle of goblins. As he watches these bogies causing a ruckus, heavy footsteps began to ka-thump, ka-thump towards the house. He hides behind the door, and in comes a giant who, after looking around a little, leans out of the window. At which point this brave boy strikes the unwary giant with a sword, cleaving the poor fellow into two. Now, When the half of the giant that was leaning out of the window fell out into the yard, there was a great tumult from the Bogles. They called out, "There comes half our master! Give us the other half!" The giant chopping Chad then says, "It's no use of thee, thou pair of legs, standing alone at the window, as thou hast no eye to see with, so go join thy brother." And he threw the legs after the giant's other half. The Bogles now fell quiet. On night number 2, again the sounds of a giant ka-thumping in approach were to be heard, and this time, standing at the door with his sword aloft, he again unceremoniously cut the giant in half as he came in. This time the giant's legs simply kept walking into the fire and up the chimney, and the lad thought, "Oh well," and threw the torso after it. On the 3rd night, no giants came, and the boy went to bed. As he was drifting off to sleep, the Bogies began to scuffle and thump beneath the bed. Now, looking underneath, what does this plucky lumchucker see? These ghastly little scamps playing with the golden ball. Does he snatch it away at an opportune time and run away? Does he try to talk to the Bogies? No. He uses his trusty sword to slice and dice and cut up the Bogles every time a limb of theirs emerged from underneath the bed, until they were all wounded and ran away, leaving the golden ball behind for him to inevitably save the day with. Now, if you haven't picked up on my disdain for the hero of this tale, here it is. It is incredibly rude to just go lopping off limbs of beings without some kind of dialogue or challenge first. It was an ignoble approach, and I am sure the goblins won't have forgotten him. So now we move on from what is now an army of stumpy Bogles to the story of the Lady and the Bogey Beast. This story comes from the village of Headley Hill in Northumberland in England. Now, there was this little old lady who was very poor, and she lived in a hovel. She made it day by doing errands and jobs for her neighbours. Her outlook and her dress was one of clean good cheer, and not a single one of her fellow neighbours knew just how poor she really was. So one evening, as this old lady made her way home from a day of work, she spied a cauldron by the wayside. After looking around for some time for its owner, she peeked inside, and there, inside the pot, were gold coins filling the pot to the brim. Now excited, the old lady dragged the cauldron behind her with her shawl, and as she made her way home, she dreamed of the ways in which she could enjoy spending the gold coins. And when she stopped to rest, she looked back at the cauldron, and in its place was a lump of silver. Now, I strive to be this old lady in later life, because this didn't perturb her at all. She was like, "Oh well, I'm still happy with what I found," and she began her journey home once more. Once more, she stopped to rest and looked back. This time, the lump had turned to iron. Well, still a little confused, but nonetheless happier because, iron's much less trouble to sell. She made her way once more. And once again, the old lady rested and checked her treasure. No longer was there a lump of iron, but instead a good-looking boulder. Still happy with her lot, for she could use the stone for her gate, the old lady made her way home. Once she was at her gate, she reached down to untie the stone from her shawl. And suddenly it gave a shriek and leapt up, and at once a set of spindly arms and legs appeared, and there was a long ears and a long tail, and this creature began to laugh in amusement, and it ran off on its long spindly legs over the hills. The old lady, still happy with her lot, chuckled to herself as she thought of a soul encounter with the bogey beast known as the Headley Cow. So the term bogey seems to not only apply to cautionary creatures who act as guardians or extra parents, but to ones who gather in groups to invite interactions for sport. And those soul bogies who lie in wait for an unwitting victim often appear in the form of animals who will whisk the victim away if you're silly enough to ride upon them or speak with them. And so it's clear that a bogey's intention with evil and maliciousness is one just of pure sport and getting pleasure from terrifying the folks of humankind, basically. But for now, I'm going to end the video here because I think I've had too much coffee, so I need to simmer down a bit. I will say thank you for watching and listening, and when you come back for part 3 of this video, we're going to be looking at Buggabos, Bugganes and Boggarts. A lot of burrs, but Boggarts are my favourite ones of that lot too, and if I could keep one as pet I wouldn't be mad at it, to be honest. So for now, thank you for watching again, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!